Good afternoon. My name is Willie Wilson Jr., and I'm on the board of the Frederick Douglass Neighborhood Association. There are two other board members, Nancy Martin, who is here, and Newbie Rateau, who is not. But this is our ninth year of conducting this reading. The speech is very, very powerful, and I hope you have a chance to read it in its entirety, not just the paragraphs that you're reading. Why are we here? How did we get here? Okay, this is the ninth year, and this particular site is special because to my right is the what we call the Freedom Tree, the Sycamore Tree, the Liberty Tree. It goes by all of those names, and that tree was on the property of Edward Eales Bennett. Edward Eales Bennett was a radical Republican, and he was also his stables and home served as a station of the Underground Railroad. And it is very important to realize that the community, he was a radical Republican, was one who not only believed that African Americans should be free, that there should be no slavery, but he also felt that they should have the same rights as whites. So that's the difference between a regular Republican at that time in history and a radical Republican. And so the tree, according to our records, was planted around circa 1763. And over time, it became a symbol. It wasn't just for anti-slavery, but it became a symbol for women's rights. And over the years, in 1959, the class of Brockton High, the A building was stood at the end of the street. This is Frederick Douglass Avenue now. At that time, it was High Street. Actually, with their history teacher, Pauline Hoyt, established a plaque, and that's why this whole area is important. Today's event comes with great help from Reverend Reed, Phyllis Ellis of the NAACP, Cindy Pendergrass, and those of you who are familiar with the Brockton Beer Company, right at that corner, those housing units that they're called Sycamore, 121 at Sycamore at Maine. And Cindy was instrumental in getting that name. That was, again, in tribute to the historical reasoning behind it. This is the Frederick Douglass Neighborhood Garden. The city is planning to build a Frederick Douglass Park, which will extend from Frederick Douglass Avenue to Legion Parkway, which is closer to the site. So at the end of the reading, I hope you get a chance to go by the plaque, look at the tree. The tree was cut, but the stump has grown to about 60 feet. So, and somebody said, there were some of you who were around at the time, it was very emotional when the tree had to be cut down, but someone else said, freedom, you can't kill freedom. And so we have that new offshoot. Okay, with that said, Frederick Douglass made the speech, 1852, at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. Frederick Douglass is very, very critical to the history here in North Bridgewater. Okay, as some of you know, he escaped from slavery, lived in New Bedford, then lived in Lynn, then moved to Rochester, New York. And the speech itself will speak for itself. Okay, the first stanza. The meaning of the 4th of July for the Negro. Frederick Douglass, July 5th, 1852. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude.
My name is Richard Reed, and I'll be reading paragraph 2. This for the purpose of this celebration is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This, to you, is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life, and it reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
My name is Lynn Reed, and I'll be reading the third paragraph. Fellow citizens, the simple story is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland. Although a considerable distance from your home, impose, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper.
Hello, my name is Amanda Glennon, and I'll be reading part 4 in Spanish. Pero tu padre y yo no adoptaron la idea que el gobierno es infalible, y el carácter absoluto de sus acciones presumieron a ser diferente del gobierno local con respecto al sabio y la justicia de algunos de las cargas y restricciones. Ellos se fueron o no para pronunciar las medidas de gobierno que son injustas, irrazonables, opresivas y en total medidas que la gente no debe someter a silencio. No necesito decir, cuidadosos de compañero, que mi opinión sobre las medidas son completamente en conformidad con las opiniones de tu padre. Tu padre se sintió tratado duramente e injustamente por el gobierno local. Entonces tu padre, como hombres de honestidad y hombres de espíritu, buscaron la compensación. Ellos solicitaron y protestaron, lo hicieron con una manera decorosa, respetuosa y leal. Esto, sin embargo, no respondió al propósito. Ellos fueron maltratados con indiferencia soberana, frialdad y desdén.
My name is Cindy Pendergast. I'm reading paragraph 5 in English. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial captivity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
I am Ward 4 City Councilor Susan Nicastro, reading paragraph number 6 in English. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all of the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal it. Quote, Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. Close quote.
My name is Avery Niles, and I will be My name is Avery Niles, and I will be reading paragraph 7 in English. 7 citizens, your fathers made good resolution. They succeed, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history. The very ring bolt in the chain of your yet development destiny.
My name is Shoshana Wilson, and I'll be reading paragraph 8 in Standard English. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
Hello, my name is Patrick Quinn, and I'll be reading paragraph 9 in English. They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that it is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country.
Hi, my name is Carol Griffin. I will be reading chapter 10 in English. Paragraph 10. They were peace men, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
Christopher Diorio reading paragraph 11 in English. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary.
My name is Reverend Louis Lemieux, and I'll be reading paragraph 12. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and His cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. My name is Steve Thomasy, and I'm reading Chapter 13 in English. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offerings to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
My name is Susan Thomasy, and I'll be reading paragraph 14 and 15 in English. Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us.
Good afternoon. I am Bishop Tony Branch, reading paragraph 16. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed to your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, but I mourn. To drag a man in feathers into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and to call upon him to join you in joyous anthems where inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak here today? Fellow citizens, above your natural tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions. Whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them.
I'm Sidney Murray. I'm reading chapter 17 in English. My subject, then fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view, standing here, identified with the American bondsman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare, with all my soul, that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July, whether we turn the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present. The conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly blinds herself to be false to the future.
This is part 18. Para estar de pie con Dios y el esclavo que se tritura y sigrando en esta ocasión. Voy a, en el nombre de la humanidad que está enojada, en el nombre de la libertad que está encantada, en el nombre de la Constitución y la Biblia, que están desatendidos y pisoteados. A través de esta hay denuncia con todo en el face lo que tengo. Todo que sirve a perpetuar la excluidad, el gran pecado y vergüenza de América. No voy a equivocarse, no voy a perdonar. Voy a usar el lenguaje más severo que puedo comandar y todavía ninguna palabra va a escapar de mí, ninguna palabra que cualquier hombre cuyo uso no está cegado por los prejuicios, ni quien es un propietario de esclavos en su corazón, no va a convencer a ser correcto y justo.
My name is Christina Wilson, and I will be reading paragraphs 19 and 20. I fancy I hear one of my audience say, "It is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit where all is planned, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being?
Shoshana Wilson. I'll be reading paragraph 21 in Standard English. Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalty, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from the brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man.
Willie Wilson Jr., stanza 22. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men.
Good afternoon. I'm Leona Martin, and I'll be reading paragraph 23. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice? Hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
Sidney Murray, chapter 24, in English. What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply.
I'm Nancy Martin. I'm reading paragraph 25 and 26 in English. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
I'm Phyllis Ellis, reading paragraph 27. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing and empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impotence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are, to him, mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which disgrace a nation of savages. Thank you.
My name is Mark Osborne, and I'll be reading paragraph 28 in French and 29 in English. Il n'y a pas une nation sur terre coupable de pratiques plus choquantes et sanglantes que le peuple des États-Unis à cette heure même. Allez où vous voulez, cherchez où vous pouvez, parcourez toutes les monarchies et les despotismes de l'ancien monde, recherchez tous les abus, et quand vous avez trouvé le dernier, mettez vos faits à côté des pratiques quotidiennes de cette nation, et vous direz avec moi que pour une barbarie révoltante et une hypocrisie éhontée, l'Amérique règne sans rival. Take the American slave trade, which is especially prosperous just now, and carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. That trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic opposed alike to the law of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Phyllis Ellis, reading paragraph 30. Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Shoshana Wilson, I'll be reading paragraph 31 in Standard English. Mark the sad procession as it moves warily along and the inhumane wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks thinned and grayed. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her breeny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clink and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gnash on her shoulder tells you her to move on.
My name is Patrick Quinn. I'm going to do paragraph 32. Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where, under the sun, you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the United States.
Christopher Diorio, paragraph 33. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men.
Richard Reed, reading paragraph 34. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in the most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
Lynn Reed, reading paragraph 35. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Carol Griffin, reading paragraph 36 in English. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport.
your President, your Secretary of State enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and, without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included.
I am Bishop Tony Branch, reading paragraph 37 in English. For black men, there are neither law, nor justice, humanity, nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains is sufficient under this hell black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black men into the remorseful jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in the tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open, palatable bribe and are bound in deciding the case of a man's liberty only to hear his accusers.
Steve Thomas here. I'm reading 38 and 39. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love for liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. You hurl anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria and pride yourself on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and the Carolinas. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets. Greet them with ovations. Cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill.
Susan Thomasy, reading paragraph 40. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence carries a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe, quote, that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another, unquote. Yet you notoriously hate, and you glory in your hatred, all men whose skins are not colored like your own.
I'm City Councilor Susan Nicastro, reading paragraph 41 in English. You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you, quote, hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And yet, you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a seventh part of the inhabitants of your country.
Rita Mendes, paragraph 42 em português. Compatriotas, não vou me deter mais em suas inconsistências nacionais. A existência da escravidão neste país marca seu republicanismo como uma farsa, sua humanidade como um pretexto vil e seu cristianismo como uma mentira. Destrói seu poder moral no exterior, corromper seus políticos em casa, solapa o fundamento da religião. Faça do seu nome um apito. E por palavra para uma terra zombateira, esteja avisado. Um réptil erodiendo está enrolado no seio de sua nação. A criatura venenosa está amamentando o seio tenro de sua república jovem. Pelo amor de Deus, arranque e arremesse o monstro hediondo de você. E deixe o peso de 20 milhões esmagar e esmagar, esmagar e esmagar para sempre.
Willie Wilson Jr., paragraph 43. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture that I have presented of the State of the Union, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old paths of its fathers without interference.
Good afternoon. I'm Sydney Marrow, Chief of Staff, and I am reading for Mayor Sullivan. Excuse me. Sorry. It's been a long day. The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. And if you could all read with me. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our reading. And now we're just going to have a moment of silence for our late president, John Drzezinskis, who passed away earlier this year. And if you would bow with me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. But thank you for coming out. And again, thanks to everyone who cooperated. We almost didn't do it this year. And I'm glad for the cooperation and the help from everyone.